Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Yoon Se-young and Chung Ye-in. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. Really has been the hot topic of the past few weeks. We're talking about the clash between the medical community and the government. Of course, the government has made their announcement that they are going to be expanding the medical school quota, admissions quota by 2,000 by 2025, which obviously met by strong opposition from the doctors. We had the deadline today. The trainee doctors from the so-called Big Five hospitals here in Seoul collectively submitting their resignations. They're set to, if it all goes as planned, leave their post, quit by 6 a.m. tomorrow. This is going to also potentially lead to more collective action throughout the nation, not just the Big Five hospitals. Se-young, you're going to start us off. Certainly a tense situation right now. We don't know what's going to happen come tomorrow, 6 a.m. Nevertheless, give us the latest on this.
Sure. Tensions are only growing as trainee doctors have been planning mass resignations until Monday, which is today, meaning they will stop working starting early tomorrow morning. The decision was made to protest against the government's plan to increase the medical school enrollment quota by 2,000 starting in 2025. Like mentioned above, 715 trainee doctors from Big Five hospitals in Seoul have submitted their resignation as of last Friday. Big Five hospitals include Seoul National University Hospital, Seoul Asan Medical Center, Samsung Medical Center, Severance Hospital, and Seoul St. Mary's Hospital. And if someone in your family has been seriously ill or needed major surgery, there are high chances that they have received treatment at one of these five hospitals. These hospitals are among the best hospitals in Korea, known for handling complicated surgeries and treating patients with high medical needs. That's why what's happening around these five hospitals could bring a serious vacuum in medical services. Doctors argue that the recent government's decision to expand medical school quota overlooks the root causes of the problems in the healthcare sector and fails to consider the voices of doctors. They assert that the problem lies not in a shortage of doctors, but in the lack of experienced professors with significant surgical skills outside a few major hospitals in Seoul, along with insufficient facilities in other hospitals. They also emphasize the need to address factors that turn primary care like pediatrics and obstetrics into less popular specialists. Some say it's because of the low birth rate here in the nation, but doctors say there are other chronic problems related to medical profession, and unless they are solved, simply boosting the number of doctors will never be the solution. In fact, the resignation of pediatricians from Severance Hospital has garnered attention because they have been asking for a solution for the significant decrease in applications among medical students for this department, citing the lack of adequate compensation and the challenging work environment.
And of course, we did talk to a doctor who actually works at the Severance Hospital's Children's Hospital, and that was the big concern he was saying is that if the trainee doctors do end up resigning, that there's going to be a great vacuum in that particular department. And it's very worrisome, again, for children, right? But not to mention, it's just not just these Big Five hospitals. They're potentially looking at massive walkout. They're looking at some of the other hospitals. So worst comes to worst. I mean, we're looking at a huge crisis right now. South Korea, obviously known for some of the best medical systems. This might collapse because of this collective action from the trainees doctors. How is the government responding to the situation, though?
With a mounting concern over medical crisis, but both the government and hospitals are urgently devising emergency medical response plans. This is because the aftermath of trainee doctors, specialists halting work after submitting resignation letters after 6 a.m. on February 20th, Tuesday, will likely result in significant medical gaps and confusion. What's even more concerning is, like mentioned earlier, the possibility of this movement among the Big Five hospitals spread spreading nationwide. Currently, there are approximately 13,000 trainee doctors working in training hospitals nationwide. And if key specialists responsible for emergency duties suddenly leave, it will be impossible to avoid chaos. Further, it's estimated that around 2,000 medical students nationwide will also take leave on Tuesday in solidarity with the trainee doctors leaving hospitals. Again, this collective action from hospitals and schools is expected to lead to a significant medical crisis in the nation. In response, the Ministry of Health and Welfare has issued work commencement orders to 103 trainee doctors among the 715 who submitted resignation letters and actually stopped working. Minister Cho Kyu-hong stated in a briefing, the Ministry of Health and Welfare and local governments are operating emergency medical response centers and formulating measures with related ministries, local governments, and public hospitals as well.
Again, we've been talking about this clash between the medical community and also the government, but both sides do sort of have a very, very valid argument. But also, you're seeing that many of the public who are neither with the government or neither with the doctors are very much split on this as well. Again, the argument is there is a lack of doctors. The doctors say, no, there is no real negative impact from the low doctors per 1,000, capita the OECD. We're one of the lowest, right, amongst the OECD per capita. That there has been no negative impact, and they're arguing that doctors are saying if you put in just more medical students, it's going to increase the insurance premium. Not only that, you're going to dilute the talent, and it's going to actually be a little bit risky for the patients, whereas the government is basically saying that we need this right now. And notice that this is one of the very few times that the main opposition Democratic Party is not sort of arguing against the ruling government, because the former Moon administration under the Democratic Party had pushed this. Back then, I believe they were trying to increase by 400. Even that was met by a potential collective action. And so they seem to be on the same page with this one. You have the Deputy Minister from the Ministry of Health and Welfare, Bang Min-soo, who also made some new announcement today in regards to the doctors' collective action. What do you have to say?
Deputy Minister Bang Min-soo on Monday strongly criticized the doctors who submitted their letters of collective resignation and ordered all trainee doctors to keep providing medical treatment. He said the government has issued an order for the provision of medical treatment to be maintained by the trainee doctors at all 221 training hospitals nationwide. This order has been immediately effective. And the Ministry of Health and Welfare has also ordered daily reports on the work status of trainee doctors at each training hospital. The new measure aims to ensure that doctors who have left their positions after submitting resignation letters will return to work and that their actual work status will be verified upon their return. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, the effectiveness of the work return order remains in place even after the person returns to the work. Therefore, if they leave their workplace again after returning, it will be considered a violation of the existing order.
The big fear now is that I believe the government has also announced some potential plans to increase the quota for nursing university, nursing college admissions as well by 1,000. They're saying that if they increase the amount of nursing students, that there's going to be no shortage in nurses. But the clear-cut answer to why there's a shortage is because of the lack of pay and other issues at hand. And so the fear right now is that if it's combined with a potential nurses' strike, that would really lead to a huge vacuum within the medical system. But the announcement on the nursing school admissions quota has not been made official. It's something that they just pitched out there. And so we'll see what happens. In response to the medical community's planned collective action, the government again convening a ministerial meeting this morning to discuss some countermeasures. You have chairing the meeting, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who said the government plans to activate the emergency system of public healthcare institutions and fully allow remote medical care during the potential collective action. Yane, let's get more on this.
Sure. So in order to address the rapidly escalating development, the government held the meeting titled Response to Collective Action at the government complex in Seoul, where Prime Minister Han emphasized the importance of minimizing the inconvenience of citizens from the potential medical service vacuum. Now, he outlined measures to ensure uninterrupted emergency and critical care, elaborating that the emergency rooms of 409 emergency medical institutions nationwide would operate 24 hours in order to avoid any disruptions. And he highlighted that there should be no case where the lives of the patients in critical condition are threatened. The Prime Minister also mentioned the possibility of deploying military doctors and public health doctors if the situation worsens in order to ensure that essential medical services remain unaffected. Additionally, he announced plans to extend the operating hours of 97 public hospitals and open up the military hospitals to civilians as well. Now, in his address, Prime Minister Han reiterated his call for the medical community to withdraw their decision. He stressed that such actions are contrary to what the public is hoping to see. Han underscored the necessity of increasing the admission quota as part of a broader healthcare reform, which ultimately aims to improve regional and essential medical services, saying that the quota increase was an outcome of collective conversations between the government, field experts, and universities. He said this would be the last chance for South Korea to add more medical school students, if we consider the fact that it could take up to 10 years at max to nurture one healthcare professional. He also emphasized that the proposed reforms are in the best interest of both the public and medical professionals, as they also encompass improvements that doctors have long demanded the government to implement at the same time.
Yeah, the frustrating thing, again, as we mentioned, is that it's really the patients right now, right? There are the victims of all of this. And just looking at some of the news just now, they're saying that many surgeries have been canceled and postponed because of this collective action. And so, you know, some of the things that, again, the public has been raising is the fact that if you have been starting to become a doctor, isn't it your duty, no matter what, to treat the patients and deal with these other issues on the side? Why go on this collective action?
But ironically, both sides are arguing that this is for the patients.
Well,
that's an irony.
It seems like right now, I think most of the public is kind of siding with the government stance right now. And they're saying that the reason for why maybe it's the interns and residents who are very much against this is because they're going, dude, it was so hard for us to get into medical school. Right. Why are you making it this much easier? But the argument for that is just because you increase it by 2,000, do you think if I apply to be a doctor, I could be a doctor? No, it doesn't work that way. It's still very, very difficult to get into med school is what it is, right? And so, again, it's really hard to take sides with this. I think both sides have valid arguments for this. In the meantime, we did sort of talk about this, but the Ministry of National Defense expressing its stance regarding the mass resignation of doctors on Monday. The Defense Ministry announced that if medical professionals, including trainee doctors, do go on this collective action and actually do resign by 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, the military medical system will be open to the civilians. So, Sam, let's get more on this.
Cho Na-gyu, a spokesperson for the Ministry of National Defense, stated during a regular press briefing on Monday that in the event of a strike by medical professionals in the civilian sector, the military will open the emergency rooms of 12 military hospitals, including the Armed Forces Capital Hospital, and provide emergency medical treatment. The military hospitals where emergency rooms will be opened are mostly located in outside Seoul, such as Gangneung, Chuncheon, Hongcheon, Goyang, Yangju, and Daejeon. He added that as long as it does not interfere with the military readiness, the Defense Ministry will also consider providing outpatient treatment services and deploying military medical personnel.
Really don't know what's going to happen, right? I think this current administration, they've been good with trying to fight off a lot of these strikes. If you remember, earlier on in the Yoon administration, there was a huge clash with the truckers union, right? And I think on that side, I think the public was siding with the government on this one. They were saying the truckers were asking for too much. and that and the truckers ended up kind of backing off. They stopped their strike and so forth. And I think maybe the current government right now is probably pushing for the same thing right now with the medical community. But it really is a completely different kind of collective action here. So for our listeners out there, if we get some more updates on this, and I'm sure with tomorrow 6 a.m. being the big deadline for these trainee doctors to completely end their work. We'll see what kind of updates we have for tomorrow's program. In the meantime, the February extraordinary session of the National Assembly kicking off with just around 50 days until the April 10th general elections. The plenary session where the members will vote for bills scheduled to take place on the 29th this month. Yin, tell us what to expect from this extraordinary session.
Right. So the session began today with an opening ceremony followed by a series of key events, that being the party leaders Hong Ik-pyo from the Democratic Party and Yoon Jae-wook from the People Power Party scheduled to deliver speeches representing their parliamentary group on the 20th and the 21st, respectively. Now, the Assembly will move into a phase of government questioning with non-economic issues addressed on the 22nd and economic issues on the 23rd. Now, after these interpellation sessions on Thursday and Friday, the Parliament will convene a plenary session next Thursday in order to handle some pending bills. Now, of course, the highlight here would be the plenary session where critical motions will be potentially revisited for a revote. Now, these contentious bills include the so-called twin special prosecution laws on two major issues, which are, number one, the allegation of stock manipulation by the First Lady Kim Keon-hee, and number two, the Daejang-dong Hwacheondae 5 billion won club scandals. Now, if you look at these bills, they were initially passed by the opposition party in December last year, but they were sent back to the National Assembly after President Yoon exercised his veto power early last month. The political circle is, of course, watching very closely to see if a revote will take place at this time around, as more than 40 days have passed since the veto without any actions taken so far. Now, another critical issue on the agenda for this session is the revision of the Election Act in order to adjust electoral districts ahead of the general elections. Now, the Election District Committee, which is under the National Election Commission, proposed constituencies changes last December, suggesting some reductions in Seoul and Jeollabuk-do province in the meantime, and suggesting additions in Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province. Now, the People Power Party was actually in favor of the proposal, claiming that the process should be expedited. But the Democratic Party has countered that the proposal is unacceptable, arguing that it only reduces the number of seats in Democratic strongholds while leaving the ruling party stronghold of Gangnam area unchanged.
Right, and so that's been like the big argument here. But going back to the the dual prosecutor probe bill, right? Mm-hmm. The big thing here is if it goes to a revote, it's not like the first session when the Democratic Party unilaterally passed it, right? Because they have the majority, and all you really need for the first vote is just 50%. You need more than 50% of the vote, and the DP has more than 50%. It got passed, get to the president, he vetoes it, goes back to the National Assembly, and then a revote, you need 2/3 of the vote in order for this to pass. Now, the DP, despite having majority, they do not have 2/3 of the seat in the National Assembly. But one of the things that they're probably working on is knowing that there is the April general elections ahead, and that the mass vetoing by President Yoon will not work in the favor of the ruling People Power Party leading up to the April general elections. And so they're using it again for their, I guess, their campaign process here. But we'll see. They're not going to probably get the 2/3 vote. I'll be very, very surprised. We talked about this, maybe surprising, not so surprising. I didn't think it was that surprising, to be honest with you. I think there was some hints here and there that former DP leader and former Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and former PPP chairman Lee Jun-suk were going to join forces. They've joined forces with other groups as well. We have a super team here. They are now going to be co-chairing the new Reform Party. The remaining task for the two individuals would who would take charge of the election campaign. Now, at the highest council meeting held on Monday, Lee Jun-suk was assigned to lead the April 10th general election. but internal discord is anticipated amid the rivalry with co-chairman Lee Nak-yeon. Already some clashes right now. You knew this was going to happen. Sang, let's get more on this.
Right. To be honest, perhaps the problem was expected from the moment the two came together under the name Big Tent. Lee Nak-yeon, Lee Jun-seok, they both were representatives of major opposition parties. And the question of who would hold the leadership in the new party regarding the general election was the biggest issue. In a meeting of the highest council on Monday, the new Reform Party passed 4 resolutions, including delegating the authority for the general election campaign and policy decision-making to Representative Lee Jun-seok, operating a membership qualification review committee, establishing 4 major crisis strategy centers, and appointing Hong So-yoon as the Director of Public Communication and Planning Director. The membership qualification review committee seems to target the recent controversy over the admission of Bae Bok-ju, former vice chairman of the Justice Party. She has supported the Solidarity Against Disability Discrimination, one of South Korea's prominent disability rights group, and clashed significantly with co-chairman Lee Jun-seok on various issues. As many of you know, Lee has been heavily criticized the group's subway protest. And this decision was made while co-chairman Lee Nak-yeon and Kim Jong-min, a senior member of the New Future Party, were leaving the meeting. Hauna, the senior spokesperson, explained that they were able to receive agreements from other party members after Lee and Kim left the meeting room. People from Lee Nak-yeon's camp 새로운 미래 New Future Party in particular is strongly opposing the delegation of full authorities for election campaign to co-chairman Lee Jun-seok. Kim Jong-min, the senior member, met with reporters and said handing over the election campaign to Lee Jun-seok individually is not something that can be done in a democratic party, and criticized that in terms of policy decision-making, parties' policies cannot be set without reviewing them at the highest council. You know, as mentioned earlier, such conflicts were indeed anticipated. Finding common ground beyond political engineering is difficult for the two individuals, Lee Nak-yeon, Lee Jun-seok, especially because the Democratic Party and the People's Party, where the two were party representatives, have completely different identities. Therefore, distrust and criticism toward these two individuals are increasingly growing among supporters. And many say that the alliance between these two under the Big Tent might not act as a variable that changes the scope of the election, but rather could have a negative effect for both of them.
It could. And I mean, from the get-go, I think there were signs that this might not be a very good idea. Lee Jun-seok obviously being a conservative politician, and Lee Nak-yeon being a progressive, and he even went as far as to say that one of the reasons for why he left the Democratic Party is because there was no longer the spirit of Kim Dae-jung and the spirit of Roh Moo-hyun, who arguably, both former presidents, arguably some of the most progressive presidents in South Korea's history. And there was a lot of the liberal voters who were very upset at the idea of him teaming up with Lee Jun-seok, and also a lot of conservative voters were a bit upset at the fact that he teamed up with a very progressive lawmaker, politician as well. And so it really matters who's going to lead this, right? And also another big thing is that both of them, Lee Nak-yeon and Lee Jun-seok, they have presidential ambitions. Like eventually they want to run for presidency again. Or in the case of Lee Nak-yeon, I mean, he was almost there until Lee Jae-myung kind of took over for DP. And so even that, I mean, who's going to be representing, who's going to go first and things like that, there's a lot of things that would clash with this. But we'll see again, less than about 50 days until the April general elections. In the meantime, we're going to cover some world news here. You can say you were surprised. You could either say not so surprising. We have the mysterious death of Russian President Vladimir Putin's most vocal critic in Alexei Navalny, who died in prison. The 47-year-old Russian opposition leader, we have Alexei Navalny. He died on Friday local time in a prison called IK3, and it's called, I believe, nicknamed the Polar Wolf. And some of the most notorious criminals are sent to this very prison. Now, initially, I believe he stayed at the IK6, but they secretly transferred him over to the IK3 this past December. Yane, again, people say it's a mysterious death. Others say this was seen many, many months ago. Let's get the latest on this.
Yes, so reports from The Times and CNN revealed the startling allegations that just 2 days before Navalny's death was announced, officials from Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, visited the prison and disconnected and dismantled some security cameras and wiretap devices. Now, Navalny was declared dead on Friday, with Russian prison authorities stating he collapsed and lost his consciousness after feeling unwell during his walk in a penal colony north of the Arctic Circle, located in Khark region, 1,900 kilometers above Moscow, where he was imprisoned. Now, the exact cause of death is said to be under investigation right now, as Russian authorities initially cited sudden death syndrome to be the cause. Navalny's family and lawyer were informed of this cause without being shown the body, and this also came after Navalny's footage taken just a day before his death, where he seemed to be in a perfect condition, healthy condition, even exchanging jokes with the prison staffs during his online court appearance. Now, another quite suspicious element surrounding this development is the rapid announcement of Navalny's death by Russian authorities, particularly given the remote location of the Siberian prison. Now, according to a human rights group called Gulagu.net, the prison authorities released a seemingly well-prepared statement just 2 minutes after Navalny's official time of death. Now, the incident was then swiftly addressed by Russian-controlled Telegram channel and Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, suggesting maybe a premeditated narrative. An anonymous prisoner told the independent Russian newspaper called Novaya Gazeta that inmates were informed of Navalny's death at around 10 a.m. on the 16th, that being 4 hours before the official announcement. Now, this suggests that the Russian authorities might had enough time to maybe prepare their response, further fueling some speculations around the true circumstances of Navalny's death. Now, Novaya Gazeta also reported that Navalny's body showed signs of bruising and is currently held at a hospital in Salikard village in Arctic Russia. Now, an anonymous emergency responder suggested the bruises could be related to strong convulsions or attempts of resuscitation, hinting at a possible cardiac arrest.
Yeah, that's right. And so instead of, what they're hinting is poisoning is what they're saying. If you've been poisoning, there's severe convulsion going on, and that's probably where the bruising on the head comes from, and the CPR that was conducted. Also, when you hold down a person from convulsion, you say that's where like the chest bruises are. But again, say what you will. I mean, there's a lot of different reports coming out. We're only going to be reporting what we know on this particular news. But the reason why we say this may not be too surprising is because of who Alexei Navalny is. Again, a prominent figure who really stood against Vladimir Putin and his sort of authoritarian regime. So let's kind of go into the background of Navalny.
Sure. Alexei Navalny, considered as the foremost adversary of Vladimir Putin's Russian presidency, was a leader of the opposition party, and he was born in 1976 near Moscow, where he studied law and worked as a human rights lawyer. Navalny gained recognition by criticizing the corruption within Russian state-owned enterprises and exposing the wrongdoing of high-ranking Russian officials through the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which he established in 2011. Despite attempting to challenge the 2018 presidential elections, Navalny couldn't run due to controversies surrounding his previous conviction of embezzlement during his time as an advisor to a regional government. Later on, he used the social media to reveal the corruption of not only President Putin, but also his family and close associates, including Dmitry Medvedev. Navalny's videos on YouTube garnered millions of views and sparked mass street protests involving involving tens of thousands. He also fell victim to a suspected poisoning attempt before. In August 2020, Navalny collapsed on a flight from Siberia to Moscow, showing symptoms of nerve agent poisoning. And while suspicions arose about Putin's involvement, the government denied any connection. Navalny was urgently airlifted to Germany for treatment, where he recovered from the ordeal. However, upon his bold return to Russia in January 2021, he was immediately arrested and imprisoned. Navalny's arrest triggered nationwide protests across Russia demanding his release, resulting in thousands being detained as well. Despite his situation, Navalny maintained his stance against the Russian government's actions, even expressing opposition to Russia's military operations in Ukraine from prison. Ultimately, Navalny was sentenced to more than 30 years in prison for his convictions. And throughout his imprisonment, he continued to advocate for political change and oppose the government's repressive measures.
And the charges that they slapped on him is what's called extremism. And it's basically getting arrested for having extreme political ideas and extreme religious beliefs, basically. And his guilty sentencing was because of the fact that he had extreme political views against Vladimir Putin. And in an age like this, we do see this. In the wake of Navalny's death, cities across Russia have seen a surge of memorials and demonstrations, with government responding harshly, as we saw back in 2020. Navalny's wife is traveling for some major international events abroad, and leaders around the world are also voicing their support for Navalny and their condolences as well. Yane, let's get the latest on this.
Yeah, so we've been seeing the St. Petersburg court sentencing 154 individuals detained for taking part in memorial events to up to 14 days in jail for violating assembly laws. Now, similar sentences have been reported in other Russian cities, according to human rights organizations. Over the weekend, police were seen patrolling around areas where people gathered to honor Navalny. The AFP also reported that there were reports of memorial sites being dismantled and men wearing hats discarding flowers left by mourners into trash bins near the Kremlin. President Vladimir Putin has yet to make an official statement regarding the death. Yulia Navalnaya, that's Navalny's wife, is now attending the EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels, Belgium today. And earlier, immediately after his death, she visited the Munich Security Conference, which are collectively seen as an effort to highlight the gravity of her husband's death to the international community. Before their meeting at the Munich Security Conference, G7 foreign ministers held a minute of silence to honor Navalny. Now, in the meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden has pointed to President Putin as being behind the death. Now, in a White House press conference, he stated, "There's no doubt that Putin and, quote, his thugs are responsible for the incident," warning that there will be consequences. Now, the White House is currently reviewing additional measures against Russia, but has not disclosed any specifics.
Yeah, I don't know what those consequences are, to be honest with you. In the meantime, we do still have the war in Ukraine. Russia continuing its attack. This time, the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu saying on Saturday Russian troops have taken full control of Arirang. This is a town located near Donetsk. Sam, let's get more on this.
According to the Ministry of National Defense Telegram channel, the Russian military has seized 31.75 square kilometers of territory from the Ukrainian army. In this battle, more than 1,500 Ukrainian soldiers were reported killed, and the retreating forces were said to have had no choice but to leave behind weapons and military equipment. This village holds a strategic importance for Russians as it allows them to secure their forces from Ukrainian attacks by pushing the front line away from Donetsk.
One of the things that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in his New Year's speech is that we're currently living in an era of chaos, and that the UN Security Council is doing more to basically exacerbate the situation. And we talked about the situation in Ukraine. We are now going to get the latest on the Gaza Strip, because the prospects of a ceasefire becoming increasingly grim with ongoing Israeli airstrikes and headwinds from both Israel and Hamas. Yane, you have more on this.
Right. So Israel is continuing its bombardment of Rafah, which is now home to over 1.4 million refugees. And this comes despite the international community's strong urge for peace within the region. The situation has been further complicated by Hamas leadership in Qatar, which is insisting on not releasing hostages until Israel fully withdraws its forces. Now, on the 18th local time, the Israeli government unanimously adopted a resolution refusing to recognize Palestine as a state. Now, this stance directly opposes the so-called two-state solution, which has been long advocated by the United States and other international entities as a path to lasting peace within the region. The ongoing negotiations in Cairo has been there, aiming at discussing a 6-week temporary ceasefire and the initiation of talks for a permanent truce. But it also is facing a severe setback as the Israeli delegation withdrew, citing the unbridgeable gaps with Hamas demands for a complete military withdrawal. Now, what's worse is that the whereabouts of Hamas's local leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, have become unknown, making the prospect for a potential agreement even murkier. In the meantime, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces domestic pressure to resign after the war and allegations of deliberately stalling ceasefire talks due to such pressure. The difference in views between the U.S. and Israel widens despite Biden's repeated calls for civilian protection. Still, the U.S. signaled a potential veto against a UN Security Council resolution for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza that was proposed by Algeria, which seemingly indicating that it intends to maintain its public stance in support of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of talks here. I think one of the things was release of all the Israeli hostages in exchange for a temporary ceasefire. Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire. And Benjamin Netanyahu said, absolutely not. We're months away from completely winning this war against terrorism, is what he said. And then there was some reports coming out a couple of weeks ago that Vladimir Putin reportedly asked for an agreement on a ceasefire. And basically he would stop everything, end the war in Ukraine. But the reason why it fell through, it didn't work, is because Russia refused to give back the land it took from Ukraine. And so it's a stalemate. No agreement just yet. We're already over 2 years in the Ukraine war, and who knows how much longer this armed conflict over in the Middle East will continue on. Guys, as always, thank you very much for your report. Stay safe, stay dry, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.